I'm Dr. Christina Chen, a geriatrician and internist at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And this episode of Aging Forward, we explore one of the most profound and challenging journeys in the aging experience, being a caregiver, particularly to a loved one with dementia. Caregiving can be deeply rewarding, but it also comes with emotional and physical obligations that can really take a toll on the caregiver's health and well-being. So today we welcome Kathy Anderson, who has been navigating the realities of dementia care firsthand with her own mother. And through her story, we'll uncover how it's possible to age forward, even while facing the demands of caregiving. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Christy.
So you are the first caregiver that we are interviewing, and we would just love to get to know you a bit more. Can you tell us about your background?
So I'm one of 3 children. I am the baby. My mom still refers to me as the baby. She introduces me that way sometimes. We grew up in New York, and then we moved to Minnesota when I was in my early 12, 13-year-old kind of age, and have been here ever since. Mm-hmm. I'm a retired attorney now, and I work part-time, and I've got 2 sons myself. I have 4 grandchildren and 2 on the way.
And so you're a caregiver for your mother, right? What's her name?
My mom's name is Ronnie.
Tell us about Ronnie. What was she like when you were growing up? What did she enjoy?
I knew my mom as this very dynamic, somewhat eccentric dancer, very artsy, did a lot of volunteer work in the community, which her and my dad felt pretty strongly about. But she was truly, when I was younger, one of my best friends. We did a lot of fun things together, going for drives, going up to the cities. Occasionally, she would pull me out of school in the afternoon and we'd play hooky and go do fun things.
I love that.
And so she's a different person today than she was. But what I remember is a lot of fun, a lot of really dynamic colors in life, and always wanted to make sure that she was really looking vibrant and a little bit wild in a good way. So my mom was very good about decorating, not just for the holidays, but for birthdays. Mm-hmm. So if you woke up in the morning and it was your birthday, there were decorations all over the house. And we had a very fun rule that if there was birthday cake left the next morning, you got to have birthday cake for breakfast. Mm. I think the other thing that she really loved is just nature and the outdoors. She was a very avid gardener, and we would go outside and we would just look for plants and trees. And she taught me a lot about what's in the outside world that you can just go and get out of the countryside. And I'm still that way today. I still admire the beauty of the outdoors.
And what was your relationship like as an adult and even now? How has that changed since childhood?
Good question. I would say that as an adult, for quite a few years, I lived away from home. And at that time, I would come home on the weekends and, like a lot of young adults, spent more time with my friends than I did with my parents. But when I moved back to Rochester and started a family and a career here, it really became just second nature, I would say, to always spend time with mom and dad. And for my mom and I to always have some great one-on-one time together. And we'd do fun, silly things, or we'd create a little happy hour at home. And she's not a big drinker, but we'd drink some good wine and eat some good food and just really enjoy time together. Listening to music has always been another really big thing. And that's still part of what we do when we're together. Mm-hmm. But with her dementia, which has progressed a lot since my dad passed away in late 2020, she spent her whole life caring for my dad and her children, my brother and my sister and myself. And so really with him passing away, I think she really lost all of her purpose.
Yeah.
And her dementia was already, honestly, probably worse than we knew, because I think my dad was doing some pretty good compensating for her, but then really went downhill.
Yeah. When do you think you saw the first signs of dementia? When were the first, incidents or changes that you noticed that things just weren't right?
It's funny when I think about that because she's 83 today. She was probably in her early 70s and they were still living in their own home. And I was over there for dinner and I was helping her make dinner. And she got out a bottle of wine and she got out the wine opener. And then she looked at it and she tried to put it on top of the bottle. And then she looked at it again and she handed me the wine opener and she said, "I can't remember how to use this." That honestly really blew me away because, again, even though she and I were not big drinkers, if we ever had a drink together, it was a glass of wine. And we were typically opening a bottle of wine and she was doing it my whole life. And I couldn't decide if that was just an anomaly and maybe she was really tired or really emotional, but it just didn't fit.
That's interesting. It was like a functional task manifestation. It wasn't so much of a memory lapse or not remembering certain things. Functionally, she couldn't do something that she normally should do.
I think that what I would say about that for my mom was, especially with her artsy, creative nature, she was always very dramatic about things. And she was a phenomenal storyteller to the point where when she recounted things from the past, she always added flavor and things that really didn't happen. And it was never a complete undoing of what the true story was, but she always added something. And so if she was doing that earlier than this very physical act where she couldn't open a bottle of wine, I probably chalked it up to Mom's always been that way.
I see. And as things progressed, how did she then change, whether it was her personality or her physical function?
So I think the other thing that was going on when my mom was probably in her first 2 or 3 years of dementia is that my dad noticed it more than anyone because he was living with her every day.
Right.
And what he started to tell us was she wasn't good at keeping up the house anymore. She also has a pretty good anxiety problem and that her anxiety was getting worse. I saw it manifest itself probably also in a little more paranoia over things where she would truly make up something that it didn't happen, but in her mind, she now had this paranoid thought about it. I also saw her become more of a collector of things that made no sense, junk mail. And it would always be, I'm going to kind of hoard it. And then I'm going to keep stuffing it in drawers and then become very attached to it in a way that just didn't make sense.
And it sounds like Dad was there as her constant. He was her other half.
He was. My mom and dad were married for more than 60 years. And even though he was older than her and had physical health problems, his mind, he was an engineer at IBM, and he kept his mind very active in his retirement. And so what we realized after he passed away in 2020 was that when he was telling us, I kind of can't do this anymore, and that's when they moved into a retirement community, initially in independent living, it wasn't until he was gone that we realized her dementia had progressed as much as it had.
I see. And is that when you stepped into more of an active caregiving role?
I would say that I have, in part probably because I am the baby, I've always been pretty attached to my parents. And so even before my dad passed away, I had spent probably most of my late 40s and into my late 50s spending time with my mom and dad every weekend. On Fridays, they would come downtown and meet me for coffee. And so that was second nature to me. And when Dad passed away, my initial thought was, I'm just going to keep doing those things. But then it became pretty obvious that not only was Mom lost without Dad and depressed, there were just so many things that she seemed disoriented about. And it just seemed like I needed to check on her more. And I needed to reorient her when we were together if I could. And sometimes I couldn't. More often now, I simply can't reorient her, but that's just part of it.
And during this time of transition, I mean, you were still working. You were a busy, high-level role at Mayo Clinic, and then, as a caregiver and still working, what was that experience like, having to juggle both roles?
So what's strange about how that kind of evolves is, especially today with having a cell phone at your side, I realized that not that I was attached to my cell phone in an unhealthy way, but I found myself always wanting to make sure it was with me. And I would explain to people if I walked into a meeting, my phone's on silent. I'm helping take care of my mom, and sometimes she's disoriented and she might call. And regardless of where I've worked as I've been through this journey with my mom, every employer I've had has been very kind, very understanding. And I really found myself embracing the fact that I might interrupt literally anything I was doing to respond to her, even if it was just to talk to her on the phone to help her through something very difficult because of the dementia.
Mm-hmm. Was it a very stressful experience having to juggle that and working full time?
Oh my gosh. As you're asking about it, it makes me think of a very stressful story. So I was working downtown here in Rochester, and when I was leaving work, I was driving out of the parking lot and I thought, hey, maybe I'll go see mom on my way home. So I called her, and when she answered the phone, she was very panicked and I could hear it in her voice. And I said, Mom, where are you? And she said, well, I'm downtown. I came shopping and I think somebody stole my car, which, by the way, was a pretty old SUV that I'm pretty sure nobody would steal. But I said, why do you think someone stole your car? And she said, well, I'm in the parking ramp where I parked my car and it's not here. And I met this very nice person working at the hotel, and they've been helping me try to find it. And I gave her my keys, and she's walking around the parking ramp looking for the car. And I said, where did you park? She couldn't tell me the name of the ramp, but she told me that she was by the Kaler Hotel. And my first thought was, you never park in that ramp. And I know from my many years of shopping with mom downtown that that is not the ramp that she parks in. So I said to her, I haven't left work yet, so I'm going to drive right over and I'll meet you in the Kaler Hotel. What floor are you on? She couldn't tell me. So I said, walk to the door where you met the person that's helping you look for your car, and I'll meet you there. I said, I think I know where your car is. So I met her there. She was crying, but I think because she also has anxiety, that just manifested itself in a big way.
Right.
I did go out. She was panicky for me to go out into the ramp. Thankfully, it really was a Kaler Hotel employee, a very kind woman who was literally walking around the parking ramp, hitting the button on my mom's key fob, trying to find the car. We went downstairs and thanked the manager and told them how wonderful this employee was. And then I started walking with my mom through the Skyway. And I had asked her if she could tell me where she went during the day while she was shopping. And she couldn't name specific stores, but she could say, I was in this location or I wasn't there.
Yeah. Well, it's scary to think that she had driven herself there, got confused, got lost. Thankfully, you were downtown to find her and figure out what happened. But like the confusion, that's scary.
And then when I took her out to her car, she was flabbergasted. She was like, how did you know it was here? I did not park here. And that was the other thing that I think you realize how much worse the dementia is getting when she is adamant about, I did not park here. I don't know how my car got here.
That sounded like at least one growing pain of learning. Confusion is going to be a problem. Getting lost is going to be a problem. And trying to get creative with helping orient her. What were some other things that you've learned along the way?
I think part of it is, number one, making sure that I'm talking to other people who either have expertise in this kind of care, not just mom's physician, but my sister's a retired nurse. I've got other friends who also have parents with Alzheimer's or dementia. I had a grandma die of Alzheimer's My husband had a mom die of Alzheimer's. And so you start to pick up and learn certain things, like it's far easier to distract them from something that is really bothering them or that is just completely wrong. And your initial response, you just really want to say, it did not happen that way. But what you realize is they're not going to believe you. And all we're doing to ourselves when we do that is just causing more anxiety and frustration over something versus just finding a way to easily distract her. So even today, when she starts to hyper focus on something and repeat something, I will literally in the middle of it just interrupt her and just say, oh my gosh, I forgot to show you this picture. Right. And then I'll pull out my iPad, which that's one tool. I try to bring something with me when I visit her that shows bigger pictures than on my iPhone.
Yeah.
And that way we can look through pictures together. And that is one way to distract her. Music is another. And if she gets a little bit combative, I've learned that joking around just makes it easier. She thinks it's funny. I think it's funny. And we'll even make fun of the fact that her brain's a little garbled that day. We use the word confused. And we seem to do better making light of things than taking it for the really serious thing that it is. Because it is really serious and it is really sad. But feeling serious and sad doesn't help us get through it. And so it's easier if we joke around and move on to the next thing.
I'm so impressed that you were able to figure all that out by yourself. And yes, I'm sure you've looked into resources about how to care for a loved one with dementia, but what you mentioned earlier, to be part of their reality. And when they see something that's not true, our first inclination is to correct them and tell them that's incorrect. This is wrong. This is what's truth. But in their world, they don't know what's true anymore,
Right.
and it's so much harder to not live in their reality and try to bring them back into our reality because it's just not their world anymore. And so how do we creatively jump into their world and find joy and ideas of keeping them happy and healthy in the state that they're in? I think most people have a hard time doing that because it's so frustrating and it's so hard to learn that, like, how do I live in a false reality, so to speak.
Some days are really good. And some days I'm not very good at that.
Yeah.
If she tells stories specifically about my dad and when my dad passed away and what happened that day, in the beginning for myself and my siblings, the desire to correct her because we wanted it to be accurate because it was our dad, that was one of the hardest things. And over time and really through some good reading materials, learning that it's not helpful to say, hey, remember when, or, you're just not remembering that, right? That's not what happened.
Right.
Because she does a lot of, this word I learned, it's a medical word. She does a lot of confabulation.
Yes.
Where she starts with one story, and it's actually usually mostly pretty true where she starts, and then she just makes up stuff to get to the end of the story. And she's put in different people that weren't there. She's confused decades of time. At times she's confused my brother or my aunt as her grandpa. It's just really random things where you realize that it just doesn't connect like it should anymore. And she will tell the same story differently every time you see her, even though it's not true. It is her reality. And trying to meet her where she is in each day, unless I get there and she's really down, is better.
Have you been able to accept help from other people? And what's that like for you? And was it hard for you to accept help in the beginning?
I would say in the beginning, I think we all think, I'm the child. I'm the daughter or I'm the son, and I can help take care of mom, and we can navigate these things. And you do kind of build a little bit of a probably false sense of reality in that you think you can be there if something happens, and you think you can be there every time. And I would say the biggest realization for us, and one of the changes we made in her caregiving, so to speak, is she had cataract surgery after my dad passed away. And for those folks that haven't known somebody with cataracts and surgery, it starts out with drops in their eyes 4 times a day for the first week, 3 times a day for the second week, 2 times a day for the third week. And at the time, my sister was still working. I was still working. So was my brother. And even though 2 of us lived close by, the ability to interrupt your day 4 times a day and put drops in her eyes was just not possible. And that was the first time we used the care services that through the entity she lives at, just to have somebody come in and do that. And that whole experience was, I won't say it was terrifying, but all of the paperwork, all of the expense, just all of these things that we just hadn't planned on, and we didn't want to overwhelm her with it. And so navigating that in the beginning was hard, but it also oriented us to the services that were available where she was living.
Yeah.
And then probably a couple of years ago now, my sister took my mom to one of the Alzheimer's conferences that Mayo was putting on. It was for families and caregivers for a day. And she found some great resources, one of them being Elder Network, which is here in Rochester. Although I read the other day, they're in other places, but they offer companion care. And so we decided together, my sister and I, that we thought it would be really good if we just explored what they offered. Thankfully, I always say through the power of the Lord, we found a woman with the help of Elder Network, and her name was Kathy also. And it was spelled just like I spell my name.
Yeah.
And that was a big seller for mom. She was very against a companion at first. But then when I said, well, her name is Kathy too, and I need her because when I can't be here, if she can be here, that's going to make me feel better.
Yeah.
And it's going to give you an outlet. She'll bring you wherever you want to go. And in the beginning, after they met a couple of times, she started telling everybody that this woman was her driver and that she came and picked her up and took her places. And we nicknamed her K2.
Yeah.
And she loves that nickname. My mom loves it. This other Kathy loves it. And that has brought myself and my siblings a ton of peace and even some joy. It's an amazing service. She will see her and then send me a text message and say, hey, your mom was really good today. She'll tell me when she wasn't good. And she'll worry about her with us in a good way. And that's amazing.
Have you had any really difficult days? And what were those like?
I still feel like the hardest part of my time with mom is when I leave. She's now in full assisted living. She lives in a little 1-bedroom studio. We set it up for her as best we could to really feel like the comforts of home. She's at a point right now where she doesn't know how to use her TV anymore, doesn't know how to turn on the radio for music anymore. And so when I leave at the end of a day or on a Saturday afternoon, I live out of town about 20 minutes away, and that drive home, there's plenty of times I'm bummed.
That's hard.
Or I'll get a little weepy because I left her alone with nothing to really inspire her.
Yeah.
In her apartment, she's, got pictures. We have one of those frames that, advances pictures for her and such. But unless somebody's going to come and get her and remind her it's time for dinner or something like that, she's just sitting alone in that apartment.
Yeah.
And she was very against integrating in the community as far as doing some of their activities or sitting down in the lobby or the library and meeting people. And so I just felt and continue to feel like sometimes she's really isolated, even between the companion care and my siblings and myself seeing her, she spends a lot of her days alone in that little apartment.
And with mom in her current state right now, what did you learn about how to take care of her that has helped her the most? Obviously, there are certain situations, like you mentioned, when you leave her at night, you have to go home. There's
Right.
nothing you can do then. But during the day, when you're with her, what has helped her the most now?
So what's really interesting is if you put yourself in the mindset of helping a young child, I would say 5 and under, it's so similar. And using those tools to either distract her or, I'll be honest, give her a treat, bring her ice cream, make sure that when I leave, I have put her music on because she loves that. It's the little things like that where the initial thought that you're going to take them out and you're going to go on a long drive and then you're going to go for a walk and, hike through the woods or whatever. She can't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. And so you do have to reset your expectations of what she's capable of. And even she doesn't understand what she's capable of anymore. Mm. And so you have to sort of reset and reorient. And as long as we keep her environment pretty consistent, it's easier to get her to adapt to things. And she's always been very kind, very sweet, and still is. And I'm really grateful for that because I have friends who have a parent with dementia and they're angry and they're mean. And mom can get a little spicy, but only when she feels like we're really invading her space.
I'm sure there's a lot of caregivers out there listening and really identifying with what you're sharing. It's just been a very beautiful story for me to hear about your mom when she was at her prime and her colorful self and how you grew up knowing her to watching her as an adult. And as things have become more challenging to take care of as the dementia has progressed, it's like slowly losing someone. You see them slowly being lost along the way.
I think I'm amazed at the number of people in our lives who are going through something similar.
Yeah.
And so talking about it and even the hard stuff so that people understand and are so kind and compassionate. And that's how I'm wired. And so that part, I think, is just second nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also see that probably the hardest thing that I continue to navigate is if she's not doing well, I lose sleep. So I will go to sleep well at night, but if I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm sure for people listening, that's not uncommon. It's hard knowing that she's struggling and she's got some physical problems as well. And so her inability to articulate what's really wrong and then understand you really shouldn't do that because it will hurt your hip, for example. She just doesn't process that the right way. And so that becomes something that you can overthink, I think is what I would say. I think the other way that I've changed is it's easier to just start every day and say, this is today, we're going to make it the best day it can be. And the likelihood that someone is going to call about something related to mom, it's pretty high. And if you just let yourself know for yourself and those that are around you that I might be interrupted.
Yeah.
And I literally might drop everything and leave. That doesn't happen very often. But understanding the things that bring her the most joy now and doing that together, which isn't always healthy, I'll say. The new fun thing that we do is if I bring her a treat, because she loves sugar, I get it from her and my dad, that I want to make sure that she's also eating something healthy because she does not cook for herself anymore. They had to turn off her stove when she was in independent living because she was leaving it on. She doesn't even have one in her current apartment, but she does get some of the meals, but she often says she doesn't get meals there because she's still making all her own meals. That's what she thinks in her mind. So if I bring her a treat, I now also bring something healthy. So just last weekend, we had a wonderful Italian vegetable salad, and then we had German chocolate cake.
Oh, nice.
And he loves that.
Yeah.
He just thinks it's like the biggest deal to eat that way and have me eating that way with her, which isn't always super healthy for me, but I try to stay active and I'm a big walker, and you know how it is. We're always hoping we're going to lose a little weight and do a little better. But I try to give myself some grace there because doing those joyful things with her is everything.
I love that strategy. You're doing something joyful with her that also brings you joy. And you're still spending that quality time with mom, but in a way that's kind of, again, in her own world now.
Well, it's a little decadent, right? I mean, if you're going to spend, even if it's only a couple hours on the weekend doing something like that, it was something she loved when we were younger. And as we sit here and talk about it, and I think about her letting us have cake the morning after our birthday, it's kind of the same philosophy. And it is fun and it is good. And we can be sad together, but that doesn't feel nearly as good as just doing something fun.
What else do you do to take care of yourself?
I'm a grandma of 4 right now, 2 on the way, as I said, and 2 of our grandchildren live really close. And so I'm a very involved grandma, but I also am an extrovert, which I think helps me in the current stage of life that I'm in. So I make sure that even though I work remote, which is not my favorite thing in the world, I'd rather go to an office every day and see people. I stay connected. I've got college roommates from when we were all living up in St. Paul together, and we get together twice a year. And in the wintertime, we go to one of the girls' houses down in Florida. And in the summertime or the fall, we do the Midwest. And so staying connected, we're constantly chatting. And I got a text today, I need my prayer warriors. One of my college roommates' dads is not doing well. And so having that connection, even though I don't see them all the time, is one thing. Very strong faith life and listening to good Christian rock and reading good, wholesome stories because that brings joy in life. And, my husband and I are lucky enough at this point in our lives where we can do a little bit of traveling, and it's all about trying to find the right balance. And some days it's totally out of balance. But it's really about making sure that I do try to get time for myself every day. And when I don't, I can feel it.
Here's a hard question. Seeing someone slowly lose their identity to dementia can feel like that continued loss, like we talked about. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with knowing that mom's condition may continue to get worse and her behaviors may change? She may completely forget who you are one day.
I will say that more than ever, because of how I see her progressing, it's not a fear that I'll go there one day and she won't remember me. It's the reality of knowing that I can see she's on this journey where I am going to go there one day. And she might know that I'm one of her daughters, but she won't know that I'm Kathy. And I already see her losing words. My son and I were chuckling yesterday because I took a Tupperware container and was going to wash it and give it back to him so he could bring it home. And I said, hey, why don't you give me that receptacle? And he said, what? And I said, for some reason, Grandma forgot how to say container or Tupperware, but she remembers receptacle. And as you watch that happen, we chuckle over it, but she can still talk a pretty good game, even though most of it isn't close to true. But we can see that shift. And I feel like for her, with her life, with me, it's been this long, slow burn. And so after a while, it's not that you become numb to it, but if you keep the mindset that this is today, this is a really good day, we laughed, we might have cried over something, we listened to some great music, we sang, we danced. And then when I talk to her the next day, she doesn't remember that day. That's okay. Because when we were living it, it was awesome.
Yeah.
And if you continue to think like that and keep those memories, then you hope that you keep those memories and that it doesn't happen to you. But I feel like we've lived in it long enough now that we all understand that the next stage will be that she has to move into memory care. And we don't want that to happen. But the reality of it is, if she doesn't die from something else physically, that's where she will land. And she had her first wandering experience where she was in the building and wandering in a place that she doesn't belong. And the staff there is great. And they got her back to where she belonged. And I think we all feel like she was just disoriented that day more than usual. But having her be on sort of that, not 24/7 care, but med management 3 times a day and somebody checking in on her in the middle of the night, those are the things that I think are going to help her stay as independent as possible for as long as she can. And that's really our goal.
We talked a lot about how your mom has changed over time. Kathy, how have you changed?
I would say that what you realize about life is you watch somebody like my mom go through what she's going through and living through it with her, that I was never one that had really high expectations of anyone or anything, but setting the bar really low for how a day can be is one tool that I think I've adopted over time. And then I would say the other thing is, where it's really changed me is that really a big deal? Because it's really not a big deal. Most of the things that we navigate in a day, they aren't that big of a deal. And if when I'm with her, regardless of where we go or what we do, as long as we can be together and she can still remember me and she still sings and has joy, then that's kind of everything. Nothing else really matters. And if you miss work for a day, so what? If I had to use more PTO, who cares?
Yeah.
In the big picture of life, the time that we can have with her where she's still really integrated in life is the best thing. And I learned a new thing.
What's that?
I went to her apartment a couple of Mondays ago because the PA was coming in to check on her. It's once or twice a month through the homebound program, and we like to be there. But I was watching my granddaughters that day, and they're 2 and 4. And so we come in the apartment, and the apartment's small, and they're running around, and Gigi, can I hold this? Can I do that? And they were very good when the PA was in the room, but they were a little rambunctious. And when we were done and I was thanking her for coming and telling her how great that program is, I said to her, I'm sorry that I had the littles here with me. I typically don't have them, but I had offered to watch them today. And she said to me, it's all good. She said, they were very good, but she said, even if they weren't, what we have learned is for your mom, multi-generational experiences are really important.
Yes.
They're really good for her.
I really agree with that. Yeah.
And so now we're going to try to, my mom has a set of bongo drums, and we're going to try and do some music therapy, not just with mom, but we're going to see if we can get in one of the open space rooms and bring the little girls in and share that joy with everybody else. Watching my mom with her great granddaughters brings me more joy than you could ever imagine. It's a very good thing.
Yeah.
Is it work? Yeah, because getting them in the car and getting everything ready, and then they need food, and I need a snack, and all of that. But to get them to be with her is fabulous.
Sounds like setting the bar low, finding joy in areas that we normally don't think to find joy, and being more creative, I suppose, are things that we naturally draw out from this experience.
And games.
Yeah.
So she can still spell small words, but she can still spell. And so sometimes we'll play Scrabble, or she can still kind of do dominoes. And I've had experiences with her where she's been very strategic about the dominoes game in a way that I never expected.
Yeah.
And that's always a ton of fun.
Well, Kathy, we have a closing tradition question here on the podcast. How do we empower ourselves to live well, age well, and live our best lives? And being a caregiver, again, it comes with a whole new realm of responsibilities and experiences. What does aging forward mean to you? And how do you personally do it?
I think the most important thing for aging forward is to make sure that you do things that bring you joy. And that often, even if you don't feel like it, really needs to include being around others, because community, no matter how you define that, because some people's families are very different, but family and friends and your faith are really the setting for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And if you stay focused on that and you find ways to give yourself more time away from the grind, that is really the best way to age forward. And hanging out with people older than you is a bigger deal than I would have thought when I was younger.
Kathy, this is such an emotional conversation, and also thinking about my own mom, being a caregiver myself. And it's really empowering for me too, to hear that what you've gone through. And for everyone who's listening today, we just want to empower you as well. We see you. We are all here as a community of caregivers. There's many of us out there. Don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to take care of yourself. And to remember that at the end of the day, we're all here on earth. We're all called to serve each other. And so just serving others is aging forward.
So a great way to say it.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So that's all for this episode. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit more informed, inspired, and empowered. If you have a topic suggestion for a future episode, you can leave us a voicemail at 507-538-6272, and we might even feature your voice on the show. For more Aging Forward episodes and resources, head to mayoclinic.org/agingforward. And if you found this show helpful, please subscribe and make sure to rate and review us on your podcast app. It really helps others find our show. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious and stay active.